Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Writer's Class. Whoo, I almost said the Writer's Class Ladies' Tale podcast, which would have been every podcast I had together. Yeah. Oh, y'all, it's been 2 months. So, if when I have 4 podcasts and I haven't done any of them for 2 months, I assume I just start writing whole new names where they're all in there, and therefore I'll always get it right. And just in case you're wondering, this is a new background for me. I'm not sure if I like it. It may stay, it may not stay. Who cares? No one cares about these things. I'm Winona. Oh my God, I remember to introduce myself. Ooh, it feels thrilling. I'm semi-professional now. Okay, I'm done. And I ruined that right there with those shoulder gestures. And you're like, oh, and she can't dance and did it. Woo, that's bad. Yeah, I'm gonna take it back. I was trying to pull out an Ellen-esque kind of thing, dance, dance, dance. And if you don't remember Ellen, then I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I wrote books with other people. There are like so many other co-authors, but I was a writer on them, on all of them. And some of them are, and I thought divorce was bad, and I thought being grown up was easy. If only I were me, a memoir in verse, widow's web, widow's debt, and foreign coffee. And if you're counting along, that is 6. That is 6 books, y'all. And you can get those 6 books wherever audiobooks are found. Now, if you've been following us, you know we have more than 6. Fill in the blank. We have how many books? No, I'm joking. No one's a devoted fan out there like that. Like, how many books? It's creepy and weird, but buy them all. Now, even if you say like, how many books, buy them all. I still want you to buy them. We have 17 more books, and you can find those 17 more books on www.andithoughtLadies.com. Guess what? You're not here to hear about me, which sucks because I have so much to tell you. I tell you about this one time that you are going to hear about our guest, wonderful guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on, and especially after a 2-month hiatus. That's like, we'll both get right back into it because this is my first podcast, so I'm excited. I'm Kristin Vuković, and I wrote The Cheesemaker's Daughter, which is a novel that's coming out August 6th.
Yay! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Oh, it sounds very literary.
It's funny. It is literary, but I kind of feel like it's upmarket. It's accessible, and it's meant to be not a slow read. It's meant to be like you can go through it, without it being too laborious, I think. So
Okay, first of all, like the vocabulary, we've used the word laborious.
yeah, within like the first few minutes, right?
Right? I was like, so she writes for a living. For real, for real. I do.
I do not, however, use the word laborious in my novel, I'm pretty sure. So that's just for the podcast.
But there's so many, yes, because overkill is the thing I do. Laborious task. And
Oh man.
but first of all, I want to say I find it amazing, past the word usage, that you went from literary to upmarket, because not a lot of people go, I know what upmarket is. So before we even get into
Right.
anything,
Okay.
into us what literary and upmarket is.
Okay. So in my definition, literary is very, very character driven. It's much more, it's usually slower, it's less plot based. And these are large generalizations, sweeping ones that I'm making. Upmarket, in my definition, I would say, is like it straddles the line between commercial and literary. So it does have more of a plot. It's like meant to be ideally more of a page turner. That's how I would define upmarket. How would you define upmarket? I'm curious. Is it the same or different?
Exactly the same. I believe they call it commercial literary.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they're all similar labels for like the same thing that we're all trying to describe. So yeah.
I don't understand why they can't be like, wrote a book.
Wrote a book. People like to be like, it's in this category, and it's like X meets Y, and here's the 2 comp titles, and they like to sort of, they like that. And I get that for ease of marketing, but I also think like sometimes that's very limiting. But I do think upmarket is probably a good description for The Cheesemaker's Daughter.
I just remember that I sent you questions that I'm supposed to be asking, and upmarket was not one of them.
That's okay. I totally love that question. Yeah,
I was
because I
was
think
like, you did your homework. Like, you really did your homework before you went there. You're like, no, I know what I'm doing.
Oh, thanks. Well, I feel like that one was winging it, but thank you. I'm glad I was that like check correct. Hopefully.
Oh my goodness, I'm a poet, so like my
Yeah.
generalizations of anything of the genre is like, yo, I wrote poetry. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure we
No,
have
it's like,
genres in poetry, but it's poetry.
but it's poetry, but it's poetry. So you're like, it's something, and it can be at something. I mean, I feel like generally people don't ask poets to kind of like, I don't want to like say pigeonhole their work, but I feel like they don't really ask them to be like, so, they'll be more like, what are the themes you deal with, right? Like for poets.
Yeah, and I'm gonna answer this question because I'm an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna answer this question. So no, normally people are just like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I write poetry," and they go, "Oh," and I said, "No, I actually do make a living of it," and they go, "What?"
Yeah. They're like, um, they're
And
very
then,
confused, maybe. Yes. They're like, wait,
yes,
you do that? That's like,
that's possible. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Or do
Yeah.
they just stop and they're go like, oh, you're a poet. Oh, that's interesting. And then like, does it stop sometimes? And people are like,
And a lot of times people go, "Oh, you're a poet." Now, if you're talking to publishing, that's all you have to say. Like you'll be in a conversation with someone, and then you're like, "Yeah, yeah," and they're having a great conversation. You recognize your title, and like, "I'm a poet." Oh, shoot, yeah. They immediately find someone else in the room. Like, yeah,
yeah, they're
well
like,
done.
nice to meet you.
Where I need to find someone who can actually make me money. I'm like, "Yeah, there you go."
Oh man,
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
funny. Yeah.
And on the occasion, I go, "I make money at that." They're like, "Yeah, it's like enough to live on." They go, "Wait, hold on." Go, "No, no, no, you stay over there. Wait, how did you do that?"
Yeah. Then the conversation gets interesting, right?
Yeah, but then I'm bored. Now it's time for me to go.
Then you're
No,
like, I'm bored. Yeah.
like if I'm talking to academic people, then it's like, what type of poetry? What verse?
Right.
Like,
Who are
what's your
your
favorite
inspirations?
style? What do
Yeah.
you have a historical like touchstone point that you?
Yeah.
No,
Have you ever
none
written
of
an
that.
iambic pentameter? Like those are the academics. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, that's what I know people for. They tell me that those are those people. Like,
Yeah.
no, oh no, you want to talk to that person over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. But
All
also
right.
the other people that can be like, it's great when you have a friend, like if you're tag teaming with somebody and it's like their work is like this, you're like, yeah, that was a better way to describe it than what I just did.
So let's describe your work now.
Oh, okay, well, I'll try.
No, so what made you want to write this story?
Yes. So this story, I mean, I think the short answer is that it was definitely inspired by my obsession with Croatia, which is driven by my father's sort of research into our family history, and his parents came from Croatia and never went back to their homeland. So I was the one that like went back, learned the language at Columbia University from the beginning. I heard it spoken, in my grandparents' home, but it wasn't something that they didn't want to teach my father the language because they were afraid at the time of speaking with an accent. So it was always this thing just out of reach. And I think as a writer, that just was it was a driving force for me. So that's like the personal element. I don't actually have any ties to Pog Island, which is where it's based. That's the second part of the story, which is that early on I did nonfiction. I have a background in nonfiction and travel writing, and I did this assignment on the island to cover a cheese festival for the now defunct Croatian Chronicle newspaper, which was a bilingual publication. And I just landed up on this island, not really knowing anything about it. And I mean, people ended up dancing on the tables by the end of the night. It was like this crazy, and I was like, this is such a cool island. And then there was this guy who was like, yeah, but you've heard this is Croatia's only divided island. And at that point, I'd probably only been there like a dozen times or something. And I was like, it's divided? Like, how do you mean? And it's like, oh, centuries ago, two bishops divided it. And like my brain started working, and I was like, ooh, it's also just an awesome setting. Like if you can look at pictures on like Instagram or, Google or whatever, it's just this bald, naked moonscape island that is just cinematic. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's like all limestone and surrounded by the Adriatic Sea. And it's really, really different. It looks like the moon, almost like a moonscape. And so that just captivated me. So I think it was then diving into kind of like the the people who lived there, like getting some of their stories, and then creating a character that had this divided identity, because my character is a refugee from Yugoslavia and has spent half her life in America in Astoria, Queens, and half her life in on this island in Croatia. And you know, it was a lot of the feelings of displacement and the themes of identity, belonging, and home that I really wanted to explore in my writing, and that was the way in.
Amazing. So of course, like my next question has got to be, what do you have to as three pieces of advice for
Yeah.
anyone who's going out there who's like, I'm writing a debut upmarket?
Yes, a debut. Well, specifically for that, I mean, I think like generally creating a writing community and, you know, being able to connect with other writers is hugely important. I think nobody writes in a vacuum, and getting feedback on your work is really important. For me, I was really lucky. Catapult no longer does this, or I'd be like, go take a Catapult course. But they did this thing. It was a year-long program that was a novel generator, and we gathered like once a week. It was crazy because it started in person in New York City. I live in New York City, on, you know, in person, and then it was the pandemic, so it moved on to Zoom. So it was kind of like there were three published novels that came out of that, and there were like 10 people in the class. So it was pretty amazing. And I think just having that accountability, being able to look at, you know, a novel is different than a short story, is different than an essay, like something smaller than is different than a poem, you know, where you can kind of get feedback on something that's a shorter length. But if you're doing something that kind of, you know, builds on itself, I think finding a really committed group of people is really important. I also would definitely say like rewriting is super important, revising and rewriting, and not being afraid to tear something apart if it's not working. I definitely struggled with the beginning, like 50 pages, and rewrote that once I figured out what the story was, and had to go back and like add in the elements to really set up that story more vividly from the beginning, with like, you know, the setting and just the stakes and everything. The first chapter, obviously, in the first 50 pages has to accomplish a lot. So I'd say definitely, you know, not being afraid to experiment and find things. You know, you might even change, like for an example would be, I had the father's close third point of view as one of the, it's now just in the protagonist's close third, but I did have like alternating scenes, and that wasn't working, and I couldn't figure it out. And eventually I just made it her story, and then it just started to flow. But I wouldn't have known that. And a lot of the pieces of his perspective inform the current story, but he doesn't have a close third perspective anymore. He doesn't have his own chapters. So I think being able to do that. And then third, I think, you know, if you can afford it, I mean, a developmental editor is invaluable. I think, you know, it is a huge investment, but it is something that I did before going out on submission. And I really think, especially now, you've got one shot, like it's great to just send in the most polished version of the manuscript that you can do. And sometimes you can get it to a certain point on your own, but you know, even really like best-selling authors that I know, they still do that because it's just that one level high, you know, and they have obviously agents already, but even before they're submitting, they're doing that. So I think it's really, and if it's not a developmental editor, somebody who you trust, who really gets your work, who can really go over it and give you honest feedback.
So I have to ask about your publishing journey now.
Yeah.
You mentioned about that there are 10 novels that came out that were done there, 3 novels that got published. How did you find your literary agent and publishers?
Well, yeah. So it's, you know, it's a long journey. At least it was for me. I mean, I think everybody I speak to, it's just like, you know, there's a lot of writers. I was just speaking to a writer friend who is like, yeah, it's the novel in the drawer thing. And like, you don't know if your first novel is going to be the novel that is the published novel, ultimately your debut or whatever. I like the seed of this story, like I said, with this cheese festival, that was sort of planted back in 2011. So just think back to 2011, like that's a long time ago. just for the idea of the setting. And it really took, I originally conceptualized it as narrative nonfiction and then quickly realized that would not work. I would have to spend time living there, and it just wasn't conducive to my life with like being married and, you know, having other things, other obligations. So, including work. So I felt like it was something that kind of took the form of fiction by necessity, in the sense that you can make things up in fiction. I mean, you know, you can make whole storylines up, and it was just for that drama, I needed to create it to be fiction. And you know, I definitely feel like there are real things in it. The place is a real place, but I make so much more of the division. In the, like, the division is literally not a big thing in actuality, but it took me a while to figure that out. And then I had written fiction in undergrad, but my MFA is in nonfiction. So, you know, it took me a while to like figure out how to write this novel. And, you know, it took a lot of false starts. It took me, you know, a lot of kind of like I said, getting feedback from other writer friends, and ultimately like a lot of rejection with agents to, you know, to get an agent. Like it's not like you send out and like send to 10 agents and you get, in fact, one bestselling author was like, send to at least 60 in your first round. And I was like, 60? Like not 16? And she's like, yes, 60. And I'm like, wow, okay. And like with anything, like doing your research. So I think along the line, doing your research of like, who would be a great agent and why, like, you know, being really specific about looking up titles and looking up acknowledgements, in terms of getting an agent, like, you know, work that's either similar to yours in some way, or work that they've been involved with that you admire that you can then cite. And then, you know, then having the trust that you basically get it to the point where it's ready to go on sub with editors, and it's just sort of like a leap of faith. And I know a lot of people, being on sub is awful, but it's like a harrowing type. But I feel like it's, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of have created the story that you feel that you want to put out into the world, and you just sort of take a leap of faith. So you hope that you connect with an editor, and I was very lucky to connect with somebody who really got my story and saw what I was trying to do, and gave it a home. So
Thank you. Wow, I have to say it's one of the most detailed technical descriptions I have heard that was
really?
also
Informative
and entertaining.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you. I'm glad. I hope it's helpful. I mean, I think there's a lot of mystery around the process. So like, I'm all about like, let's be transparent. So yeah.
So like, I feel like we should explain, what does it mean to be on submission with an agent? And then I stop asking you technical questions.
No, this is great. I'm very happy to answer that. So basically, when you sign with an agent, you have a contract, and then basically every agent is different in terms of like how, you know, how much they want to work with the manuscript and massage it. And like, I've heard everything from friends with like detailed line edits from their agent, or like ripping it apart, to literally like a couple of notes that are verbal, and then it's like ready to go out into the world and with their, you know, with their letter. So basically, like when it gets to that point, they will either, and again, I've heard like the gamut in terms of how this works, but they will basically get together a list of editors that they think are appropriate for your novel or your whatever you're publishing. And sometimes they'll discuss it with you. Other times they're just like, trust me. Like I said, I've heard a vast array of experience. And then they'll basically say like, okay, now we're submitting. And then you wait. You wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. It's like, it's a waiting game, essentially. So you're like, okay, I'm just waiting. And it's at this point very good to like start something new or occupy yourself or try not to go crazy, because you are going to be waiting for potentially months. So, and then the rejections will start to roll in, and some of them are very nice, and like others of them are like just not my cup of tea, and you're just sort of like, I will try not to hide in a hole and be sad. And then, you know, if you're very lucky, one will come in where it's like, we would like to make an offer. And And that's how that works, basically.
Yeah. Like, I believe people go, how do you keep doing things when you keep hearing the word no? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I've been a published author since I was 10. So no is just like my life.
Yeah. You know what? I feel like you should put that on a coffee mug or a t-shirt. No, it's just my life. Like that is like, and it is. I mean, rejection is part of the game and it's part of the process. And I feel like, some of the rejections I got, actually, I believe in threes. So like if, I get three things from people, I'm like, ooh, that's something to flag and pay attention to. And maybe I should go back and revisit and think about how that might work as feedback that I could incorporate. Because ultimately, I think as much as we're artists and we want to put things into the world that are, obviously authentic to our vision. The reality is when you are trying to sell a book, it is selling a book. It's making it a commodity to some extent, right? So there is then the idea of writing for an audience, and I believe in like being very open in terms of like I want to do what makes it better. Not if it's completely misaligned with my vision for it, but I think there's really, I go back to the value and feedback, and I think it's really important to be open to that.
So where can people find out more about your book and about you?
Yes. So I have a website. It's KristinVuković.com. I know that last part is a little tough, but it's VUKOVIC.com. And it's KRISTIN. And it's available for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes Noble and probably a lot of indies at this point. And yeah, it should be on Regalo Press's website, which is my publisher, which is the new imprint by Gretchen Young. And yeah, I think my website is like fairly ancient. It needs updating, but it has some of my travel writing and has the general cursory things about the book. So
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
yeah,
It has been an absolute pleasure to have
you
you.
too.
And
Thank you.
I feel like this is an upmarket interview.
You're like tag upmarket. If you want the definition and the whole discussion, that's it. Awesome.
Definitely it has literary notes, but it's commercially viable.
Right. That's exactly commercially viable. Yes, exactly.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close and roll it up for me over here. I keep forgetting there's normally like a jade on either side of me. One looks like a jade. Sometimes she sits here, sometimes she sits there. So I'm always like, and it's like, no, it's just you.
It's just you. It's just you after 2 months. So I'm excited. It's
Yeah,
awesome
right.
to be back. Yeah.
So you can find out everything that your ladies are doing at www.andithoughtLadies.com. While you're there, you can take a moment, go down to the middle of the page and see the 3 charities that we proudly support. We ask that you take a moment and give them some support. It does not have to be money. It could be knowledge. It could be, boots on ground and hand shoveling dirt and or helping people out. Who knows? But we thank you in advance for helping them out. And remember that wisdom is all around you if you're open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Winona and the Missing Jade. Oh, yeah. Thanks for listening.